Good afternoon. Go ahead and I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank you for joining us. We're going to, today's topic was looking to 2023. What should your community do with the new map and state broadband planning? Today, I'm joined by a couple of my favorite people, Molly Weiner, who's the Director of Local and Regional Planning for Connected Nation, and Heather Gate, who's our Executive Vice President of Digital Inclusion. If you've joined us throughout the year for these events, neither of these faces are new to you. They've joined us, they've spoken, and are absolutely experts in what our communities need to do as we look to 2023 and beyond. Want to get started today. We're going to take a few minutes and take a look at what is probably the most or one of the hottest topics in broadband around the country right now, and that's the new FCC National Broadband Map. Their draft version came out on the 18th of November. And so certainly want to take a moment to take a look at it. The technical difficulty we were having a moment ago and kind of what held us up there for a minute was it looks like maybe the map's not responding as we would expect it to this afternoon. So of course, the first time I've seen that happen is today when we're trying to talk with you all about it. But with that said, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go ahead and jump into looking at the National Broadband Map. While I pull that up, Heather or Molly, anything you all would like to say as we kind of get started here? I think you're muted.
Sorry, Wes. Thank you for having us. We're excited to have this conversation about the map. I guess a good place to start is, why is it important to participate in the challenge process? And it's very important for a couple of reasons. The challenge allows you to really look at the map and evaluate it from three perspectives. The first perspective is to make sure that your location, whether it is a household or a business, or is on the correct location. The second one is to sort of look and see whether the providers that are indicated on the map are where they are available at that location. And then the third one is to actually assess the mobile connectivity in your neighborhood. Now, the reason why this is important is this is our national broadband map that is going to be the basis for funding for deployment. And so the more accurate the map is, the better it is for your state or for your community as well.
Thanks, Heather. A little bit of a lead in there. I'm going to jump back here to the homepage. I would guess that many of you all have been on here and have looked at this, and if not, we simply can't encourage you enough to spend time in here looking at the map, looking at your own home locations, but certainly encouraging friends, family, coworkers, basically anybody that'll listen to you long enough to go and take a look at the map. And as Heather said, to really focus on the location, whether or not the locations that are represented in the map are accurate, and then whether or not the services that are reported would be accurate for your location. And that would include, for both fixed services as well as mobile. Hopefully this is going to work. Certainly you can type an address in. I'm going to do a random selection of location today. Again, we were having a few issues earlier with it reporting the location information, but we'll see what happens here. I do want to point out that when you look at the map, it looks completely blue, which is a lot of service. Like, it makes it look like there's service everywhere. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, this is a representation of 25 by 3 service, so 25 megabits down by 3 megabit up or greater, and any technology. And so that's what we see in the default map itself. So certainly feel free, the little cogwheel there, you can go over, you can change what type of service you're interested in looking at, the types of technologies. For the purposes of the conversation around looking at 2023, I'm going to go ahead and turn all wired and licensed fixed wireless on. And we're going to turn it over here to the 100 by 20 as those are numbers that much of the planning work will be looking at specifically. And what you'll notice is that as I changed those options, things started to look different, considerably different inside the map. And so what we have is the the state or the United States represented in these hexes. You'll notice here in this right hand side of the screen, the map legend shows us the percentages of service availability for those hexes. And so we'll start zooming in. I'm going to pick a random place here that has some variety to it. And as you'll notice, as you scroll in and get closer and closer, those hexes become smaller and more defined. And as you hover, if you hover over those, you'll see the particular percentage, availability percentage at 25/3 for all wired and licensed fixed wireless. I've not been to this particular location before in the map, so we're all kind of discovering this today at the same time. Keep zooming, keep zooming. Again, you see further and further definition of those hexes. And eventually you see individual locations on the map. I'd like to point out over here on the left-hand side, you do have map navigation controls. So zoom in and zoom out. If you click this, that resets everything to the north. If you get it kind of look one direction or the other. If you happen to click on this, it's going to try to represent or zoom you to the closest location for you. Sometimes that's going to might be your home or your place of business. Oftentimes it's going to be a piece of network equipment. If you happen to use a VPN or something, it may put you on the other side of the country or the world. Really just depends on how your traffic is controlled through your network. If you hit this view nationwide, that just takes you back to that national look that we had initially. And then there's a handful of additional layers that we can look at. Oftentimes satellite is something that is very useful, particularly as you're looking at locations. You've typed in your address, you've zoomed to a particular location, and you notice that instead of this dot, and unfortunately it's not going to retrieve, it's telling us that it's not going to retrieve provider details. Typically it's going to have the address. Maybe that address is not complete or is incorrect. Maybe your location is right here. You can see that you can challenge a particular location by double clicking on the map. But certainly this is one of the areas that I apologize. I know that Heather or Molly posted the link for the map if you don't already have it. With the map not retrieving the provider details and or location information, it makes it a little bit more difficult for me to explain. But certainly if you click on any given location, typically, you'll note that the legend tells us that there's coverage not available at this location. Typically, you can click on that. It will highlight that particular location, give you the address for it, and then we'll tell you information. If it's a served location, it'll give you the information about who is offering service in that location, and a list of those services available here. If by chance you disagree with a location, so we'll do a little hypothetical conversation here. I typically try to look at some of these rural locations because it makes it a little bit easier to find areas that where some of these location issues might exist. Looks like this one's probably right. Looks like a home, but then you have a couple of different barns. In some instances, and this is why we encourage you to look at your location information. Some cases that dot might have the correct address and it might be your homestead, but they actually have the actual broadband serviceable location placed on the barn. You could very well actually say that this is, that it's in the wrong collection. So if you click on this, usually here on the left or right hand side, you will find a challenge link, and you can click on that, and then you can walk through the process of challenging the location and or the types of service that are available. Again, it'll give you a list of who all is offering service in that particular location. Someone mentioned trying to use the Firefox browser, so we will give that a shot. I'm going to unshare for just a second. Heather, while I'm trying to switch that around, do you want to pick up for a second?
Yeah. So the location challenges, oh, are you able to see it?
There you go. Sorry.
Oh, still not, it's not working still.
Can you see it now?
I can see it. We can see the map.
Yeah, it's not. I haven't been able to get to the Firefox.
Okay,
This is all I've got at the moment.
okay. Let's give you the chance to go to the Firefox. So I guess we could talk a little bit about, shall we move on to what's happening in Texas in terms of, is the state doing a challenge? Talk a little bit about that. And then we
That'd be
can talk
great.
about,
If y'all, yeah, if y'all would like to go ahead and move forward on that,
Yeah.
you can talk about either ACP or what states are doing. And I'll work to see if we can get the national broadband map up.
Mhm.
Yeah, Heather, I think that's really important to talk. A lot of state broadband offices are working on their own challenge processes, but this is a public facing process. And a lot of states are encouraging everyone to take a look at these maps. And that's especially important. I know a lot of us on this call are based here in Texas. The Texas Broadband Office has indicated that they won't be doing any type of bulk challenge during this. And I don't think we've set the timeline. This is the reason why this is so timely right now, is that this data is due January 13th, kind of for this, the first kind of processing of the first set of challenges. And data that's in by January 13th will inform the maps that the NTIA is using for the BEAD allocations. So really this next month is critical that we get these maps as accurate as possible. And so I know specifically in Texas, because there is no state challenge, a lot of communities, a lot of cities, counties are taking it upon themselves to kind of really reach out to communities, encourage the public facing challenge, which I think Wes hopefully will be able to walk through in a second, what that looks like, or some of the crowdsourced bulk challenge work. And so the Broadband Development Office has put together a resource, and I'll drop it in the chat, of what this looks like. But that it's really important. And even in states like Michigan, where the state is, like the MyHigh office is doing a challenge process, they're still encouraging everyone to take a look at that, because state data sets have their limitations as well. And the more people who have eyes on this map, the better the accuracy will get.
Exactly. And so what they call the consumer challenge is also highly recommended by the FCC. And so they put together a toolkit that communities can use to just share with local residents for them to be able to actually do their own challenge on the computer. When it comes to, one of the most challenging things is what qualifies as a challenge. And it can be as basic as attaching a screenshot from a provider who is listed as providing service, but does not provide service. So going to that provider's portal and just entering your address and getting that rejection, well, screenshotting that rejection and attaching it as evidence that you're not getting service is pretty enough. And I see Molly has, if you can pay attention to the chat, Molly is actually sharing some valuable resources. The FCC toolkit has flyers, materials, and things like that you can distribute within the community to encourage individual households to do their own challenge. And I think we're back in business.
It looks like we are, actually. Thank you. And thanks, Ron, for letting us know that it's working in Firefox. But all that said, so here's I think we ended up, in Nebraska. Again, when I went in for just a random location, I ended up out in Nebraska. And so, we can see here what looks like a cluster of homes. Certainly, reported number of broadband serviceable locations. And so there's one here. We've got the address. So you can see here that if for some reason I wanted to challenge that location, that instead of it being here, it should be here, or that there's nothing there. Certainly you can click on the location challenge. You'll be presented with this screen, and you can go through and present the information. As Heather was talking about just a moment ago, you can describe, if you like, why you're challenging this. You can also submit supporting information about the location itself. And then there's the disclaimer, the certification that they ask for as it pertains to, that you certify that you're the one capable to make that challenge.
Before you leave that screen, can you click on the categories of challenge, because that's very valuable information.
You're talking about, sorry, on the location challenge?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's the incorrect location address, incorrect location unit count. So in instances where you may have multiple, I guess a multi-dwelling unit, you can report the count there, that it's not the right building footprint, which is kind of what I was discussing there a moment ago, that it's a not serviceable location. Heather, I don't recall, what do they define as non-serviceable or not broadband serviceable locations?
It's not, it's weird that they put that in the location challenge, because that seems like more an availability challenge. But basically it means that there is not one provider that can provide service at 25/3 at that location.
And then again, add additional address for the location and incorrect location building type. Right. And it was interesting. I've been on a couple of different conversations or listened in on a couple of conversations. There's been a lot of, particularly in rural areas of the country, discussions about broadband serviceable locations at agricultural buildings, in areas. I looked earlier, I found a broadband serviceable location that was a silo. I forget what state that was in, but nonetheless, it's really important that we're taking a look at this, particularly if you own property, that you own your home, wherever you live, wherever you do business. It's worth taking a look to see how these are identified. We find this one kind of interesting because everything on this screen is noted as having service, except for this location across what seems to be directly across the street here. And it says it's not served. So there's not a provider saying that, well, it's saying it's not served. Yeah, because it's not under the 100/20 threshold there for the fixed side. If we went back to any technology, I would suspect, yeah, that changes back. So from an availability standpoint, if you were to live in one of these locations and say these services were not available to you, you could then present an availability challenge. You could select which provider you think is that you're not able to get services from, and then you can go through and complete a similar challenge to the location, but very specific to that provider and your experience there, with, again, any kind of supporting detail that you can provide.
Interestingly, they allow you to select whether you want the challenge to be sent to the provider or not. And so Wes and I were talking about what does that mean if you're not sending the challenge or directing the challenge back to the provider so that the map can be fixed. I think it has a lot to do with experience, giving consumers the opportunity to talk about experiences that may not necessarily be mapping related.
Absolutely. One other thing to make note of here is that you can go to the mobile broadband view. And so in this particular instance, it looks like AT&T, Northeast Colorado Cellular, T-Mobile, TDS, or Telephone and Data Systems, and Verizon are all reporting services in this area. Again, you have the ability to do a mobile challenge. If you do the mobile challenge, you notice it's taking me away from the screen. The FCC has a very specific manner in which they want you to complete these types of challenges. They want you to download their speed test. So essentially they have their certified speed test that they want you to use. They want you to do the test outside. They don't want inside or tests from in homes or inside of businesses or buildings. So they want you to run your test outside. If you run through this, there's a few stipulations, but again, you download the app to actually complete a challenge for mobile data. Gonna take this back out to the home screen for a moment. You can search by provider, the type of provider. You can look at more specifically what a provider's footprint looks like in a particular area, again by utilizing the different layers. Let's go to mobile broadband. Yeah, okay, close. But once you're in a particular location, you can search those, look at them. You can look at an area summary. We can do this one's on my mind as of late. Although it doesn't seem like the map's being super responsive. Or not. Yep, area could not be found. So we're getting that same. Now we're having the same issue in Firefox that we were having before.
Les, can you change the drop down from state to county?
Thank you. That maybe that's the problem. There it goes. So there we go. Nice catch. So to let us view Castro County again, it'll set the hex sizes. You'll notice that it's going to provide us with a little bit of information, but again, make note that what we're looking at here are any technology at 25 by 3. If we go in here and make changes, it will give us some additional info. Again, lets us look at the map based on that adjustment. So we're again at all wired and licensed fixed wireless, 100 by 20. A little bit more information here about what the county looks like. You can look at the state, the county, congressional district, census place, tribal areas, and CBSA or MSAs. Those are the individual regions or areas that you can look at. One last thing to make note of is there is a data download. So you do have an option to download some of the data, do it by state or by provider. If you download this data, it's just data tables associated with this the submitted information, and certainly would encourage you to take a look at that. But of most importance is most certainly this location summary, and really encouraging everyone in your community to be taking a look at the map. It's unfortunate that we've had a couple of issues today with the map loading the way we would expect it to. I think it's the first time I've seen that problem. But most certainly encouraging your friends and family and anybody you run into to get in here to take a look at their specific address, make sure that the locations are right, and that if providers are submitting the data there to the best of their knowledge, does that look accurate? And if not, is it something that they should look at challenging? So there was a question that came in that says, what are those last two areas that were abbreviated stand for? And I think you were talking about in the area summary for the CBSA and MSA. Those are essentially metropolitan statistical areas, or census Bureau statistical areas. So oftentimes, let's see, I would think Dallas, Fort Worth. So they're going to, in general, they're going to be larger metropolitan types of areas, like you were seeing there. I'm in Kentucky, so yeah, Bowling Green is an MSA. If I click on this, take it a minute, but it's going to encompass, should be like parts of Warren County and 2 or 3 other counties adjacent that have some statistical and economical kind of factors that really focus on the Bowling Green area. I promise Bowling Green proper is a metro, might be considered metro, but everything outside of it's fairly rural. And so it breaks all of these areas up into those areas where commerce and people drive to, they look at a number of different statistics about how those are developed, but that's what that stands for. Heather, Molly, anything else you all would want to hit on with the map at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, can you touch a little bit about why is this map supposed to be better than the old one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So better than the old, why is this map better than the old one? The locations, being able to look at specific locations, being able to look at how the data is reported there. It's just far more granular than what we've had in the past. And I wish we kind of had the old overlay of what census blocks look like. But in the past, if any one location was serviced, then and that entire census block area would be considered having service. And so I'll kind of drive down in here and see if I can't find another random location to look at it that might help kind of visualize that a little bit. But what that does is that tells us what we were looking at was if one city block, for instance, had if one person in that city block or one location in that city block had service, the entire city block would be considered having services. Certainly that is not the case any longer with the new data. But with change comes the need for continued growth, continued scrutiny, and ultimately that's why these locations are so important. But yeah, when you drive down and can look at individual locations, and here we are looking at a bunch of areas where it says coverage is not available, kind of see a mixture here. This is a good example. Why would a home or location in that's between 2 serviceable locations not have service? Don't know, right? If I live here, I'm curious why my neighbors to the left and right have service available to them. So those are the types of questions that having this kind of data starts to drive. And in particular, that's the kind of information that the FCC and ultimately, once we've narrowed down the locations and and have a better understanding for the accuracy there, we're going to be looking at federal dollars that flow to our states through this information. So that's, as Molly was saying earlier, we're driving kind of towards this January 13th deadline of trying to get the challenges in place so that as we expect mid-year next year, when funding allocations for each of the states are made under the BEAD program, we have a more accurate allocation in each of our individual states. And so those locations are going to drive, the number of locations without service are going to have a very distinct impact on how much allocation each state will have.
So thank you. We have a question from Jerry, and that actually could be a good lead into our next conversation. And Jerry says, in my community, a brand new provider just laid down residential fiber and it's not included on the map. Is that something to be concerned about? Or are we mostly just concerned about service that is falsely shown to exist? So this map, by the way, is the FCC considered this the pre-production map. The data on this map is data that was submitted by providers in June. So it's sort of time-stamped for June. And so any deployments that happened after that are considered, are not on this map. The plan is that they will be 2 submissions per year once the actual map is launched. And so hopefully then it'll continue to keep it as accurate as possible. As far as, does it matter that the provider is not on the map right now? Not necessarily. I think for this January 13th deadline, I think there's 2 key things that are very critical. It's to make sure that the location is on the map accurately. And the second thing is to make sure that the providers that submitted data at June are providing services where they say they're providing services. And if they're not, then we need to be clear to challenge it, to make sure that they can make an update to make sure that it's accurate. These new providers will have an opportunity to submit their data in the next window. And I don't know if you know when that window opens, Wes.
I want to say that the update is ongoing right now, and to close towards the end of the year, which then we'll have a new iteration of the map to follow there fairly shortly.
Right.
Like you said, Heather, the most important thing is to ensure that right now is that locations are present, right? That you don't have large areas where with new development that aren't represented on the maps, or that that you've got large vast areas of rural locations that aren't accounted for.
Right.
Those are the most important things right now. In both instances, quite honestly, what that means right now is that the state would, if they don't have service represented on the map at the moment, that essentially those are just unserved, and
More money.
we want to do what?
I said more money.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Ultimately, at the moment, it would be something that the state would benefit from, even inadvertently would benefit from. And I would say the same thing here with the question that Ryan submitted about a municipal service not having submitted their services yet. They should most definitely be working with FCC to get it updated. And again, the important piece there is to ensure that the locations within that municipality are accurate and that they're all there. And because again, this is going to be an iterative process. The kind of the hard thing about all of this is that the timing for updates and for challenges are kind of mismatched at times. And then we have this looming deadline of February the 13th or January 13th to submit any of these location challenges, which again will have the eventual impact on allocations at the state level. Certainly an address here or an address there are incremental, will have incremental impacts at the state level. It's when we have larger numbers. There have been conversations about what a larger number looks like and if that's marginal. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're trying to account for all locations and that they're accurate, so that as we make plans and then the states makes plans over the next 5 years or for the next 5 years, that they're able to account for where people are and how to best serve them. But yeah, and each of the individual states will have their own broadband grant programs, and so in that time span, companies will have refined the data that they submit. Maps will be refined. Many states will have developed their own broadband maps, and so that's the state of Texas plans to release its own broadband map. Molly, is that the first? Is that when that's expected?
January 1st.
Yeah. So, the most important thing about today's conversation is location, right? The old real estate adage, but it's making sure that all of those locations are accounted for. I noticed one earlier, just looking around, where it was a farm, and for some reason, almost every building in that farm operation had been marked as a serviceable location, which is not kind of the standard way of how that's handled. Typically, it's going to be, you know, the home or an obvious kind of office shop building. But it's important to make sure that all of these locations are being reported accurately, regardless of you know, the service availability, and then turning our focus on service availability from the providers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just going to hop in quickly to say, kind of, we're seeing a lot of folks in Texas get really kind of creative with this challenge process, because it can feel overwhelming, right? If the state isn't taking lead on this, to think about how you reach everyone in your community to check this map. Especially, as you can see, sometimes the technology, right? You got to find a different browser to make it work in, or you're trying to ask people that don't have internet connection to go on the internet to find out if their house is on a map. So we're just seeing some coalitions pop up. I've seen, if you're in the San Antonio area, San Antonio Digital Connects, they're working on a region-wide kind of crowdsourced challenge process to really get the word out and try to submit a bulk challenge. So trying to plug into regional networks where you can. I know in Travis County, they're looking to do targeted outreach. So what are the areas they know are the least likely to be served? And then they're going to make sure that those parts of the county, they really double down their outreach efforts on, instead of trying to take on the whole county. So I think that there's some ways to make some real progress in these next few weeks to really do that outreach. And so we'll just encourage folks to plug into their regional networks, to use the outreach tools that are on the broadband office, the FCC's tools, to really kind of do what we can in this next month to really check these addresses, make sure that our regions look as accurate as possible.
Yeah, real quick, a couple of things. So as you navigate, and if you haven't already played with this, as you navigate, you'll notice that once you get back out to the hex, away from the individual locations, you'll notice that it turns off some layers. And so as you navigate, just a kind of a word of advice, you'll have to go back over and turn these on as you're searching. And unfortunately, as we've been looking around, we haven't been able to, I haven't found any of these locations that are have already been challenged, but as those challenges come in, you can actually turn these on. And if you're in an area where one of those challenges has been made, you'll actually see that light up, and you can see here, blue is a location challenge, like a purple is a missing location, and then there's an availability challenge that lights up kind of yellow. Real quick, before we transition here to discuss ACP, there's a
question, by the way. Oh,
yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's a question here specific to Michigan and the efforts that Michigan has gone through, and really is kind of the work is finished now and starting to will begin to have an impact. But the question is, how was the MEDC's OSP and asset verification support this effort? And I can tell you that the MAHA office is planning a bulk challenge. There's a couple different types of challenges. Much of what we've talked about today are individual challenges to locations, but organizations, and MAHA being one of them, will be doing bulk challenges to the map. And so the work that was completed just a few weeks ago actually will absolutely impact that data is being analyzed, and locations are being analyzed to mount a bulk challenge to the map for the state of Michigan. And so while they'll be doing that, it remains important for individuals to challenge the various different aspects of the map itself. All right. Well, let's move on. I know we've talked about the affordable connectivity program a few times, but right here at the end of the year, looking at 2023, it's just so important to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to continue to talk about it, I guess, because what we do know is that, yes, there are plenty of availability issues, connectivity issues, but in so many of our communities, affordability remains one of the biggest things that as a barrier to people's adoption of service. And so just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about ACP again. Maybe encourage you all to talk it up amongst your communities as well. And so I guess to Heather or to Molly, one of you all like to run down who's eligible for ACP?
Molly, are you unmuting? I can respond if you.
I was gonna hop in real quick. Yeah, and thanks, Wes. So the Affordable Connectivity Program, right? It's the FCC's program about how to help make the internet a little bit more affordable for folks. And so there's a lot of different ways that people can qualify. And so many of them are, if they're participating in any type of federal benefits plan, they usually are an automatic qualification. So if we've got folks on SNAP, free and reduced lunch, Medicaid, federal housing, WIC, those types of programs, they will qualify for the ACP benefit. Anyone that's below 200% of the federal poverty line, which is a lot of those program requirements, if you're on Pell Grant, if you're a Pell Grant recipient, if you currently use a provider's low cost plan, because many providers often have been working with communities to help make service more affordable. So those are the main kind of qualification criteria for the program, and what participants are qualifying for is usually a $30 a month benefit. And that benefit increases to $75 if you are a tribal resident living on tribal land. But that benefit is available to folks monthly, along with, for many providers, they're participating in the device program as well, which is $100 towards a device, a one-time use for households.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Molly. Oh, sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and so the ACP grew from the emergency broadband benefits and was funded through the infrastructure bill. Now, the big thing that they did that is pretty relevant to this discussion is that they actually included funding for outreach, which is what, from analyzing how the emergency broadband benefit worked, they realized that they missed the opportunity to make sure that local governments, entities, and community anchor institutions that provide services to those people that qualify for it needed funding in order for them to be able to help with enrollment and to help with participation. And so right now there's some funding that is available, and the FCC has really recently released in November some notice of funding opportunities with windows that close in January to apply for funding, and local governments are eligible for some of the funding, and nonprofits are eligible for other funding opportunities. All of that to say, there's an opportunity to apply for money, and the deadline for applications is, I believe, January 9th. And this funding will fund outreach activities and enrollment activities, which means that you can have as many people as possible in the community participating in these programs, and thus accessing broadband.
Yeah, and real quick, what are some, I think sometimes this feels very cut and dry, and what are there any unique ideas that you all have or that you've seen where communities are starting, really, I guess, trying to get people involved and engaged in this?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things. There's local governments that are literally just, maintaining information on their websites, housing authorities that are sending out information with newsletters. It's really as basic as it sounds. It's how can you most effectively reach your community, whatever way that you want to. The FCC actually makes available, they also have a ACP toolkit that also communities can use for outreach purposes. It includes PSA messages, it includes flyers that can be printed, it includes like press releases and information that can be a copy and paste into local material and then customized for local use. And so I think it's just, how do you reach the right audience in your community and you go for it. On the other end, the providers are also doing their part, getting the word out, because as you know, the $30 or $75 if you're on a tribal community go straight to the provider. And I'd like the EBB with the ACP, customers have the opportunity to choose whatever plan they want. So they can go from paying from free service if they chose something that costs close to $30 to getting a higher level of service and getting a $30 discount on it. So there's a level of flexibility that's much, much better than the EBB.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's we've seen some interesting cases where churches have gotten involved and they're trying to sign up patrons. So really nobody has to necessarily be certified to encourage people to sign up for the ACP. Really, it just takes somebody who's interested and passionate about seeing their community become connected, and especially helping break down, I guess, the affordability barrier that exists, and just bringing as much information to the community as possible through it. So
yeah, some of the more creative ones are food banks.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why food banks are invested in this is because they get a lot of people who are coming in because they've lost a job. And so they're really interested in getting them connected so that they can apply for a job and get back on their feet. And so some of them are actually keeping materials in the food bank to share with people to say, this is how you can get connected again, and it's affordable. And they know that most people that are coming in there probably qualify for SNAP and other services as well. So being as creative as possible to get the word out, because this is, we can't afford to leave anybody behind. Because it's common sense, right? It makes sense that if people are connected, we can save money. We can be more efficient as local governments if we don't have to print paper and send paper, and we can get messages out to people, information out to people in an efficient and effective manner, and when we know that everybody is connected in the community.
And here with the last few minutes or so, we had talked about just the types of relationships, what a community really needs to be focused on. I mean, there are lots of things out there that they can be doing, but one thing for certain that communities really need to be focused on, particularly as we move into the new year. And so with that, I've got a couple of questions I'll just toss up to either one of you. But the idea of should or how should a community organize itself as it pertains to connectivity, affordability, so on and so forth?
So I'll start, and Molly, you can jump in. I think what's critical right now is that if you've been watching the news, states are getting planning money, and it's planning money for the for infrastructure, and it's planning money for digital equity. And so what they're going to be doing over the next 270 days to a year is they're going to be involved in a planning process. And the planning process requires them to go out in the communities and talk to people. It requires them to collect local plans. If local communities have their own plans that they've been working on, they have their own initiatives that exist, they need to make sure that the State Broadband Office is aware of those. Because in order for the State Broadband Office to create effective and representative statewide plan, they have to get input from local communities. And what that means is that part of the planning is to identify and target programs for funding. And your program can't be funded if it's not known. And so if you have a local community plan, make sure that the local community plan gets in the hands of the State Broadband Office. They're going to be going around states. They're supposed to be going around the states doing community engagement activities. And these can be listening sessions. These can be whatever local community engagement activity a state decides to do. We encourage everyone to participate. If you get that invitation, you show up and you make sure that the community is represented in the plan. If you don't get the invitation and you don't get the plan, then figure out who the state broadband office is, reach out and ask questions on when they're going to be in your community. And then once these plans are developed, they're supposed to get feedback and input. Make sure you're on the listserv to receive that information for review and feedback to ensure that your community is represented in the plan. And so that's my recommendation, is to track what the state broadband office is doing, because the planning comes with a lot of dollars, and it's important to show up and represent your community.
Yeah, no, Heather, I think all that's so spot on in terms of building that relationship. I would just note, like, the state broadband offices, they're small. They've got, 3, 4, 5 full-time people who are about to process multi-billion-dollar grant programs. So the more that you can do to raise your voice on behalf of your community and to speak out and say, hey, look, we know what our needs are. We've put together this plan. We've got this team. We've built a relationship with a provider who's interested in coming to our community to build out connectivity. The more that you're able to kind of share with them, say like, hey, we're about to make your life a lot easier, right? We've got this ready to go. We've done the work. We've thought through all of these things. I think that is invaluable to a state broadband office in terms of having that level of outreach. And I'd encourage people to share it with their local elected officials as well, their state reps, who can be other key allies, especially. I mean, legislative sessions are coming up. This is going to be a topic of conversation. What state broadband offices are doing with all of these federal planning dollars, these federal grant programs, if states are going to kick in additional dollars to kind of supplement, like, these are all going to be conversations. So making sure your elected officials as well know that, like, they've got a community that's ready to go, that they can be advocating for through their channels as well, I think is also critical.
And I think one more thing is the NTIA has been really encouraging coalitions. So if you all can organize within your own community so that you have a very representative voice of that community, coalitions are really, really being encouraged by the NTIA. So talking and being organized and making sure they cannot ignore your voices is very critical.
Yeah, and I think, I was just going to add in, Wes, I know that these offices are trying to be as proactive as possible. So the Texas Broadband Office, the first Thursday of the month, they're hosting a local government call. Anyone can join, ask questions, hear updates. The MyHigh office is doing similarly. I think there's a call tomorrow about the Robin Grant program that's opening up in January. So sign up for updates, follow along with what that office is sharing, because they are trying to put out as much information as possible. And trying to provide as much of that detail. And I know it's a lot to keep up with, right? They've got monthly board meetings. They've got, they're testifying in front of legislative hearings, but as much information as you can gather, I think all of that is really helpful to really understanding how you can help the broadband office accomplish their goals.
Exactly. And just to add one more thing, Michigan will be starting community meetings in January. I believe they're going to be doing 30 across the state to really have opportunities to really hear from the communities and to really have a discussion about what needs to be in these plans.
Yeah, thank you all. As we plan for these types of workshops and whatnot, there's always the what do you hear, and it never fails that when I have folks that join me for this, I get the chance to sit and listen a little bit. And even in all of our talks and kind of planning for this session, I don't know that I had even heard the urgency in our own voices. And so, as we look to wrap up now, I would say urgency. Is if you had to pick one word, there's urgency in all of this. And like you said, Molly, and Heather both, the state offices are working diligently with very limited resources at the moment to try to put together a plan. And ultimately that plan's purpose and priority is to bring universal service to each of our individual states. So whether it's Alaska or you know, Puerto Rico, the priority is to bring universal service into our states. And so, you know, at the local level, don't hesitate to reach out and to begin to develop relationships. One of the things I hear there, you know, yes, they're going to reach out, but if you wait, you know, you don't want to find out it's been too long or you're too late. So it's better to begin to do some research and reach out to your state offices. And then certainly as it pertains to the current broadband map landscape, as well as ACP, and that's just to promote it amongst your community and make people aware of kind of the impact it has. You know, the locations right now by January the 13th are super important and will directly impact the amount of funding that goes to each of our individual states. Every state is, I guess, guaranteed $100 million. But beyond that, it will be locations and other factors that really drive how much additional funding each state receives. And then ultimately ACP, it doesn't really matter if service is there if someone can't afford it. And so ACP is there to help fill that gap and is already available. And so that's something that communities can be actively pursuing and engaging in this afternoon. You can hang up and help somebody with that today. And so I guess we want to stress the urgency of all of it. And now's the time. We've talked about, you know, the future for a long time, but now's the time. In early 2023, we're going to begin to see a lot of things change, and certainly a lot of plans being developed across the country that help to bring us universal service at a individual state level. Any additional closing remarks? I didn't see any other questions, so I'll let you all close with any remarks and let everyone go today.
No, I think you addressed it, you closed it nicely. So I think just to echo your sentiments, it's urgency and just representing your community in the report is critical. But I do want to thank you all for joining us today. Feel free to follow up. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send them to your broadband solutions manager or Wes and Molly. Do you want to go ahead and put your emails in the chat in case somebody wants to send an email?
Well, and Heather, I will once we've got this chance, we'll send out some resources.
Okay.
And I'll make sure that everybody, you know, the emails are on there and all that.
Okay.
But certainly feel free to
good.
reach out to me directly. You should have my email from the invites. And I can distribute questions as needed.
Yep. So thank you so much. Thank you very much, Wes, for hosting.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining. And with that, we will go ahead and close out today.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thanks, y'all.